Good afternoon. Hi, this is Jason with Washington's Dying. I have Jim Miller here today. Jim traveled over from OMAC, and we're going to talk about voter integrity. And I'll have him start a little bit about the organization that he represents with some friends of mine that I also know, Dylan and Mai, about voter integrity and some stuff that we've kind of worked on together with all you guys.
Okay, thank you for having me here today. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I've actually been working on this for over 8 years, starting back in 2008. And it started as a conversation in a conference on civic education with Centers for Self-Governance with about almost 1,000 people that attended that conference. And one of the people that I met was an engineer who owned Leader Technologies, who basically invented and has the patents, holds the patents even to this day for metadata, the ability for the internet to scale. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. The more I talked about it, the more I described what I tried to do at Boeing, trying to organize a global supply chain database and how it miserably failed before metadata was actually put out and stolen from him and created by the Eclipse Foundation, which is what IBM formed with a consortium of many of the high-tech companies now, and then all of the IPOs, basically $3.5 to $4 trillion worth of value stolen from Leader. So we met, we talked, and we became friends. Well, fast forward to the 2016 election, we've been talking and doing lots of research, and we were researching Cambridge Analytica, Miss Food, Steele, the dossier, and we kept coming across this name, Sir Geoffrey Patty and Lord Malloch Brown. So we did the research, and we came across, we were also interested in election machines. We came across Venezuela, Jimmy Carter, CIA, the Privy Council, Lord Malloch Brown, Smartmatic, Optech, Dominion, ES&S, Mitt Romney. So we traced all of this back through various SEO records, government records, and we discovered how this has all come to what we experienced in the last few months in the 2020 election. And I've actually been working on that since the 2016 election. After we did all of the research and we knew who all of the players are, and this is all documented, and then I asked to do a deep dive into the Washington State election process. So I did PRRs for our local Okanagan County process, since they're all the same in each county basically. And I got the documentation, but I couldn't get the software. They wouldn't let me have the software. Even to look at it, they were going to charge me $400 an hour to even look at it, and they didn't know how many hours it would take for them to present it. So basically, they made it way too expensive for me. So going back to a background, I spent 17, almost 20 years working with Boeing in process engineering in cabin systems as a project manager within an engineering group. So I know the development of software, the hardware, how difficult it is and how much work and how high the quality is to put something on the airplane to make it work. It is beyond imagination if you haven't actually experienced how much work it is, and the insight that the engineers have to go through in the documentation to change a bit from a 0 to 1, just a few bits. It is painfully excruciating. So I likened examining the election process to building an airplane part. And so I gave it as much time and scrutiny as I could. And after a while, it occurred to me, and I had Leader Technologies help out of Columbus, Ohio also. We talked about it all the time. And we decided that the black hole in the entire system is the tally computer, in that there is no way for humans to audit what's going on. And as a programmer, and developer, I know that you can put one thing on one routine, something else on another routine, and I can reference one routine with a word or an electrical signal or anything, so that if I'm doing testing, I can test for one thing and it'll always be correct, right? Mm. But when it's not that test, it's always something else. And we have discovered that there is an algorithm that is being put in play, and we saw it in the 2020 election in the battleground states with this year. We saw it in play, and it's been going on in Washington State since at least 2012, if not from 2008 election. Certainly since our current Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, has come into office, she has amplified the control of the election machines. We don't know exactly how it's working. It's just very odd that we have candidates who lose who should have won. Mm-hmm. And they have been calling me and telling me, I don't know how I lost. I don't know how I lost. It seems impossible. But now we know. So having done this, I started publishing this, about a year ago, all over Facebook, and Dylan Moore and Mai Fong contacted me. Bless their hearts. They're true patriots. And Dylan formed freedomwashington.org, the Freedom Washington Foundation, and that's the vehicle that we're going to use to go through an education process over the next 2 years or 4 years, whatever it takes, 10 years, to raise the awareness for the citizens of Washington State. They need to be re-educated, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but we need to understand how sacred our right to vote is and how powerful it is. And we need to guard it with our lives, with our souls, because that vote in aggregate is the only thing besides violence that is protecting our inalienable right. One man, one vote. And for the self-governance that is part of a Republican form of government, which, as far as we know, is the best form of governance ever devised by our founders in a massive creative spark of genius, of God-inspired genius, to give us this Republican form of government. This is a grand experiment in self-governance, and it's still ongoing. In my opinion, and many other people's opinion, we have not maintained our republic properly, and that is why we're in the position that we're in right now. So Dylan and Mai sought me out, and we formed Freedom Washington. That's simply the nonprofit vehicle that we will attempt this project.
Well, that's how when I found Mai eventually, or it was unique circumstances too that I won't necessarily get into, but that's why then we eventually found a little bit more about yourself, and also when Dylan then was the local, because he I think was up in Linwood or up somewhere up above Seattle,
Everett,
and so then he came down. He has 2 young babies and kids, and so in full-time job and all that, and he's real passionate about all this stuff, and we coordinated before the election. We did numerous different things, out there with them, and I consult on a daily basis about different things, or talk or chat or different stuff, kind of behind the scenes about different things. But and she's educated me on a lot of different stuff. And then when Dylan came down, though, that's where I learned just how far advanced everything was, about what you guys kind of knew about what was going on. And then lo and behold, not only at the local level, but then when you see this unfold at the national level, what I thought was very interesting is how you guys it's exactly what you guys had, even brought up in some of the podcast. And, it was like nobody ever kind of came to any of you guys and asked any questions or anything like that. And then after talking with you, you obviously are the deep dive expert on it as well. And so, can you kind of go over and tell me, what are the, real important components of an election with integrity? What would you say those are? That are real important.
Probably the first and most important for a citizen is to, as we previously discussed, is just how valuable and sacred each vote is for them. It is their expression of their future and how they want to be treated by their government. And their government are their servants. They are not servants for the government. It's that vote is a singularity. It is an instruction set of instructions to the servants that this is how we would like things to go, to be done. And each one of us expressing that in our self-interest, if the votes are properly counted and they're done and they are counted openly, fairly, and transparently, then the will of the people, which is the essence, the soul of a republic, is the unfettered will of the people, then you have a proper election. The components of it are, number one, chain of custody. And if proper chain of custody is followed, then the will of the people have the highest potential for being properly expressed. That is, the balance to be tallied, that all of the ballots are properly counted, can only occur if proper chain of custody is maintained through the entire process. And previous to election machines, you went to a polling place, your identity was checked because you pre-registered, not the same day, not within 24 hours, but 30 or more days ahead of time, so that there was integrity and the ability of that person to be known, to be identified properly, so that they could vote. So you had registration. It was green bar paper, as far as I could remember, being printed out on a mainframe. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. And you would show your picture ID, your driver's license. They would look at you, and there was some reasonable chance that you were the person that was going to vote, that you were Jim Miller, and he was showing up at a polling place. So we need to have those clean voter rolls. We really need to have that process. That does not need to exclude anyone. That can be amplified, but we do need that integrity that goes with the proper voter rolls.
How much more is the population of America grown in 2020 versus let's say 1985? Is that something you have? I'm just saying, because I remember when I was a kid, you'd see that, and my dad would drive up in his old Camaro or whatever, and we'd get out and we might have basketball practice, and then they'd be voting and stuff like that, and so, because now they'll use the whole digital and, the big tech and how, being able to use that to make it a more efficient type election. So I was just curious, if they can use that as some sort of an excuse as to why they don't go back. They're not going to roll back. They always want to roll forward. So is population, I guess my main thing is, could population...
Probably 100 million. I would say over 100 million.
Yeah.
We're at 320 now, I think. So half of those are voters. Yeah. So we have maybe 150 to 180 million voters nationwide. Could population ever be
something that would affect it in any way, or do you think there's...
I don't believe so, because in the voting process, if your ballot is... If you can vote twice, then there is no integrity. Mm-hmm. If you can vote for someone else, there is no integrity. Mm-hmm. If you can go from one state and vote and then go to be bussed in and vote in another state, then there is no integrity. Mm-hmm. You only get to vote once, one man, one vote. So the only way that we can ensure that is proper registration, and we can use high tech to do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, in the state of Washington, prior to Jay Inslee making us a sanctuary state so they didn't have to do fingerprint profiles for people getting driver's licenses. That was how it was done, so that you could have a person sign up, get a driver's license, and with proper documentation, 30 days prior to the any voting date, so there was time to vet them, you received a fingerprinting profile, and that could be used to identify you.
Mm-hmm.
But when that was waived, he fired the Department of Licensing person who refused to do that, put her on the cannabis board,
Mm-hmm.
moved her, brought in a Evergreen College graduate in gender studies who knew nothing about anything, put her in place, and they stopped doing the fingerprinting profiles. So the state has not, the Department of Licensing, has not properly vetted, and they automatically signed these people up and put them on the voter rolls. Without ID, we don't know who they are. I was part of a team, just a small part of it, not the whole team, and I didn't do the major work. I did some of it. We've identified 365,000 people in this last election who've moved either in-state or out of state. We don't know where they moved to. We don't know. They have phantom addresses. We ran that through the Notice of Change, or the NCOA process with USPS. That's a certified process by the federal government. So we have 365,000 people in play that we don't know. We can't cross-reference those because the Department of Licensing won't release them. They won't let us do a database comparison, which would take just a few hours to vet the entire process, but they won't let us do that.
Yeah, that's the thing that I found very interesting is that in regards, there was a former, I think it was a governor candidate or ran against Jansley, and I think it was 2012. Just trying to, I'm not so certain about the exact particulars of the name, so I don't want to necessarily mention it. But the particular person said that Kim Wyman, the reason that she was reelected in 2020 is because she was doing an excellent job. And I just about fell out of my seat when I said that, because I have a friend that moved from Covington to Buckley, and he got an election at both addresses. I have a friend that's a Canadian national, and she's got 3 kids from here, and her husband's from Montana, and she's got a master's degree. She's actually going for a PhD right now, and she's a speech pathologist and has had her own business for many, many years in this area, but she knows she can't vote, so she's not going to vote. So if this woman's doing an excellent job, we all know if you have ever been and done an excellent job at your work, you really know what that means. But when you have 365,000 extra ballots, and we all know about all the other stories we've heard about people, we've had people that were emailing us through our own little site, pictures and different things of weird and odd ballots that come in. My question is what has this woman been doing since she's been elected? Because there's so many extra ballots that are coming in, and I watched that Javon Pulitzer's video, and I believe that was in Georgia. And then you see what some of the stuff that could be going on, and you just think, God forbid if they're doing something similar to that, because there are so many people that are getting all these extra ballots, and so it's just too bad that people could think that somebody is actually doing a good job, and we all know we're not even educated, and it's obvious that it's a mess.
I did a Benford's analysis on all of the people that moved, the dates that they moved, how many people moved. That's a numerical study of how numbers, if they are randomly created by the laws of nature, they always fall out, the numbers 1 through 9. And if humans are picking them, your chart doesn't follow the Benford analysis curve. And there are half a dozen counties in the state where people have moved, where those dates and those records had to be artificially created, not by nature or nature's laws, God's laws, because they don't fit. They don't even come close to Benford's curves. So the mathematical analysis, which is used even in this state for financial fraud and the IRS, so it's proven in court, we don't pass the sniff test.
Yeah.
And it was fairly easy to do once I had all of the data.
Yeah.
So there are counties, I won't name them, here, but one of them is a formation of islands. It's just completely whacked out.
Mm-hmm.
And others are in eastern Washington. It appears almost as if they borrow numbers from certain counties in their algorithm and leave others alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pretend to know or be smart enough to be able to know statistically. It's something you'd have to look at, and of course, we never will get that evidence.
Yeah,
evidence.
And that's the tough part for me, is that how they just seem to think that, you know, that we'll get into and ask you questions about, you know, voting and the Constitution and things like that. But, you know, is the Constitution, and how they just don't abide by it, you know, and tell me a little bit, you know, as we get into that in terms of the relation of the Constitution and what, you know, the relation of voting and what that has to say about our rights with the Constitution and that.
Right. In a republic and in the Federalist Papers, the mind of the founders was one man, one vote.
Mm-hmm.
That goes way back to the Magna Carta, to ancient man. It always has been, in a sense of justice and fairness. You know, it's baked into our mind, our sensibilities of what civilization is. And an advanced civilization that where one man, one vote doesn't count, well, then the people no longer have confidence in that or their ability to get along with each other. And almost all of those situations have evolved into violent bloodshed, horrific suffering, economic destruction. And so we don't want to go there. We want to have one man, one vote. In our United States of America, each state is guaranteed a republic form of government, not the Republican Party, small r, a Republican form of government, which is where you elect representatives who represent the people, who are the servants of the people. And the powers and the authority are spread out among 3 branches or more. And therefore, no one branch or no one set of people can gain all of that power. And every time that has happened in society, then especially in a democracy, democracy is aptly described as 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. So each time one set of people gain majority, they persecute and even murder the others and persecute them. So those systems always devolve into tyranny, where you have a dictator who's put in place to get control. So the Republican form of government was a self-governance that spread that power out, so it made it very difficult for that to happen. So you could have the most important thing, and that is the people's inalienable rights and their powers that come from God can't be taken away, and they can live happily, and the government will support them and give them domestic tranquility, and the most important, economic stability. So the essence of Washington State is Article 1, Section 19 says that no authority, civil or military, shall interfere with the right to suffrage. So what does that mean? I interpret it as, and many of my friends of like minds, and I would ask everyone to think about this. This is a nonpartisan issue. It is the Constitution as it is written. It says that the right to suffrage or an election or the vote belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the state. In fact, the Constitution says that it does not. So we've given up our authority. We've let the state take it for whatever reason, because we haven't maintained our republic properly. We have given it to the state, who now tells us what to do. Sit behind the glass. Sit 10 feet away. You can't have a camera. You can't take any pictures. You can't breathe. You can't take any notes. You have to sit there like in a kindergarten class. And you can't object. So the state has taken away the right of suffrage, counter to our Constitution. So in my mind, the most important aspect of an election is for it to be constitutional.
Okay, so I guess this next part will be maybe potentially a segue into this kind of a 3-legged question. Here is going to be Kim Wyman, then Eric, which is the electronic Registration Information
Yes.
and then also the Department of Licensing, because and as a part of that too is, you know, when you look at something like Kim Wyman and you hear the different influences that she has, or you look at Jay Inslee, you know, and the financial backers that these politicians have, it's just completely out of hand. You got like, well, Zoomies, you know, nobody, you know, Zoomies was popular when I was a kid. I can't believe that people still, you know, I was never really into that kind of clothing or whatever, but the thing is you look at Microsoft, you know, the state of Washington was a financial backer for Jay Inslee, as was the University of Washington. And it's like, that seems like an unfair advantage for another candidate, but you go through, you got Facebook, you got Google, you know, you got Amazon. Okay. So they're getting this, all this money that's coming into these people. And so then how does that affect, you know, with the Department of Licensing, and how all this stuff kind of is a melting pot that goes into taking the rights away from the people, because these people have more money, they have more influence than the people do. And that's, I think, the part that the people and our Constitution, you know, our Constitution wasn't formed in a way in which the people lose their rights to corporations, to Starbucks and to Costco especially. You know, that to me, 130 people have COVID there, but a restaurant in Black Diamond, they come and, you know, they shut them down or whatever it is. Incomprehensible. And you know, so my biggest thing is also kind of the mantra that I have is how is it that as a state we can't stand up to a guy like Jay Inslee? He doesn't seem to me, he's in this position of where he's there, but it's not like, it seems like this great leader that, you know, you just stand up and are like, oh, you know, I mean, even like Barack Obama, at least when he talked, he was like, wow, man, he was good, you know. And Donald Trump, he's like, yeah, he's great, you know, you listen to him. But Jay Inslee, I mean, how can Washington State suffer from this guy? That's what I look at it. So as I kind of went around there, I kind of maybe felt, you know, went into some other areas that were sensitive to me, but the main thing is how the Department of Licensing and they've just ran it loose so that it can bleed into our voting system to influence, you know, their way so they can get favor to it.
Right. Jay Inslee made us a sanctuary state so he didn't have to do, or he had an excuse not to do a finger profile, so that the fake records as they were created, some of these 365,000, and moving people around, shuffling them around, giving them false addresses, is a great way, especially when they move out of state or move to a foreign country. I mean, we had thousands of people move to Canada, Germany, England, even China. So what's that about? And they still get a ballot? And especially all of the people who live in Canada who get a ballot and who aren't present 30 days ahead of time. Why is it that we even send a ballot? Why is it that when we did checks on the voter registration database through the notice of change address, Russell Scow was the one who came up with this brilliant idea. Thank you, Russell. And how is it that when you do a query for people who've moved over a year ago and you look at it that they voted, so the question comes to mind, how did they get their ballot? If the United States Postal Service doesn't know where they live, how did they get their ballot? So it's highly likely that those people are phantom people, and those phantom people were created through the Department of Licensing. But the Department of Licensing has been set up in conflict, probably willingly and knowingly, so that each one could have an excuse with the other within the state, but the state has created a binary conflict so that Kim has an excuse. Well, it was their fault, and the Department of Licensing says, no, it's Kim's fault. What we say as citizens, we're paying you to get it right, not to blame each other. If you're not doing your job, then maybe you are doing misfeasance and malfeasance, and maybe a lawsuit would be appropriate to a point to do that. And I know the Culp campaign filed that lawsuit. How it's going to turn out, at this point in time, I don't know personally. I haven't been appraised of that. But that's a perfect example of what Kim has done to not, or to have an excuse for not cleaning up the voter registration database, 5.2 million people on the database, but only 4.6 million people voted. What happened to the rest? Well, we know at least 365,000 of them moved someplace. Mm-hmm. So this is really, not to get lost in the data, but this is symptomatic of the fact that Kim has not done her job. She has not done her job. It's not just my opinion. The facts bear this out. And the state of Washington has set this up, and I believe our current governor was part of this as he did these appropriate political and strategic tactical moves in order to create that situation so that they could have this white noise within the election system. Mm-hmm. And it is my opinion, and if the state wants to prove me wrong, they can, but they can't, and they won't try. They will just say that I'm crazy. But in fact, they can't deny it, because if they deny it, then they have to prove it. So they won't let it go to court, because once they touch that tar baby, they have to deal with it. So their tactic is not to deal with it.
Well, real quick, I remember when I was a kid too, so I grew up in, early 80s. I was, in elementary school, and, 84, I was in the 4th grade, let's say, okay? So I had friends that delivered newspapers, and if you really look back when they delivered newspapers, that's a pretty organized system.
It is.
First of all, they had all these 10, 12-year-old kids, whether boy or girls, that are out delivering newspapers, right?
And they knew how to collect their money, too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so these kids would go out and deliver newspapers, and I remember I had this one friend, and you're trying to tell me that kid would keep delivering newspapers if he was delivering more newspapers than he should? 365,000 extra newspapers, and extra drop spots, and foreign countries, and all of the extra mailing and all that stuff. It's just inefficient. And so, when I look back at how organized they were, really, with these kids, and they all woke up at 4 or 5 in the morning too to do it, and they are more efficient than Kim Wyman is at her job. So right. That tells you that she can't even do a better job than an adolescent delivering newspapers in 1983.
Yeah, there's another aspect. As soon as Kim was elected in 2012, she formed what is called ERIC, or the Electronic Registration Information Center. Mm-hmm. And she formed a nonprofit with 4 other states, presumably to exchange information so that people that moved to those states, they could clean each other's records. Although they don't explicitly state that, you can go online and just Google ERIC, Washington mm-hmm. Voter Database, and you'll get their page and all of the information that defines them. But we can't figure out what exactly that they're doing or their purpose is. They may be giving the state a scrubbed list, but it certainly hasn't been utilized. It's nothing that we've seen, and we've downloaded it 5 or 6 times.
And she did that her first year in office, right?
First year in office.
It was like franchised out.
It's franchised out. It's now 30 states in the United States. Yeah. All of those states now are in the battleground states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia. All of those states are all part of ERIC.
Yeah. Well, if she was such a big thinker and well-known politician within the Republican Party, why don't more people know about her throughout the country? And she developed this ERIC type system, and really it's a different type of device that's really meant to really kind of alter elections, is really all the system is.
As a open source programmer and a database designer, I would bid on the contract to maintain Washington State's voter registration database. All I would have to do is just exchange information and then update their database. It would be a good gig. It would probably pay very well. It's not real easy, but it is not rocket science. Yeah. Any database designer can run queries and set that up, write stored procedures. I could automate it and collect a check. I'd love to have that contract.
Yeah.
So it's not rocket science. Mm-hmm. It should be done. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been done for over 4 years. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why does ERIC exist? Why is there this nonprofit when you could simply bid this out and get it done much cheaper, more cheaply, and more efficiently? and have competition to drive the price down, we don't understand why ERICs exist. We can only assume from lack of information that it's not good.
Well, that's the part where I say any outside influences that could affect any of these politicians that are helping them with their campaigns or to get them in their positions, it's just not something that has any place in our government. You know, that right. They come in and they're just normal. You know, they already make a good salary, right? They already give themselves raises every year. They don't. There should be no outside influences. This should be a muted society that has no outside influence, and it helps at least protect our Constitution and protects our citizens from things like that and outside influences from affecting them, and they should be, it should be criminalized, really. Anything. I'm not saying necessarily right now that is what's happening there, but we see, you see the donation list. Why would somebody donate some of the money to some of these candidates that are there? Is because they say they're all bought. Every one of them are bought, and it has to be completely removed in our whole society, in every state, at every level, and you just got to win by, well, what do you got to say and who do you go out and see?
Right. Big Pharma is a big win in Washington State.
Well, you saw that what came out about all of
Pfizer,
them and who they all got money for. So
just to be humorous, I was just wondering if they were handing out free Viagra.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
But anyway, that's crude humor, right? Sorry.
Yeah. No.
So you asked about high tech. In my mind, because you can't maintain chain of custody with digits, with the digital information, zeros and one, when it hits the silicone and is operated by the instruction set or the code, it's hidden in secret. And anything can be done with a virus, with anything. You can have hidden circuits on any computer. We know that Intel actually has the hidden machine, a whole nother instruction set that no one knew about except about 5 years ago. And it's always been there. It even has its own web server. Mm-hmm. And people are asking, why does that exist? Why has that existed? We literally don't know. When the third party comes to update the software prior to every election on those tally machines in the state of Washington, we do not know what's going on. Kim Wyman and their technical person, with whom I have had many conversations, they cannot give me evidence that there is an audit, that the testing actually tests what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So in the state of Washington, when everything is scanned by the Optech OCR technology that counts and puts the summation of the ballots onto the tally computer, there is no human audit. Once that thumb drive goes into that tally computer, there is no human intervention, and Kim Wyman will not let anyone touch that. I wrote a writ of mandamus demanding that we change that process so that you had chain of custody, so that we develop chain of custody, because once it hits the silicone, it's gone forever. It's hidden in secret. Everything else is a magic show. I mean, if all of you election watchers, if any of you are listening to this podcast, ask yourself, in your own mind's eye, in the soul of your mind, ask yourself, run it through your mind, what did you actually see? Did you actually see a total? Did you actually see something being counted? I will tell you that you did not. You saw a report that was printed out, but we don't know where that came from. What circuit? Which program? Did you see the program? Did you get to test it? Is that software open source so everyone or anyone can look at it? Is it transparent? No, it is not. It's hidden in secret. Everything about our election process is hidden and secret. They can do anything they want, and it is my contention that they are. We know that in Pennsylvania especially, and in Michigan, and in Georgia, that they stopped the election process because they had miscalculated their analysis of variance, statistical prediction algorithms, and they were being overrun by their own miscalculations. And so they had to stop and introduce scanning of all of these ballots, presumably from names that came out of the ERIC Association. I don't know, but I can only presume that. How else did they get all of those names? They had everything pre-prepared. So this plan, this conspiracy has been planned for 4 or more years, and it was executed almost flawlessly.
Well, that's the question I have too, is as we kind of come close to kind of wrapping this up, is that, you know, when you look at like our money, we have the U.S. Treasury, right? And I don't know all the particulars about it, but I would assume that our money is kept in the U.S. Treasury and been made within the U.S. Treasury, I would assume. So we have our U.S. elections or our Washington state elections, you know, our House of Representatives and our state Senate. They meet in Olympia and they meet in our just like the city, all of our cities meet in our cities. You know, I've heard that, you know, the servers were some of our election servers were in foreign countries and or like places like Amazon. Okay, so Amazon has obviously a very liberal agenda and things like that. So for me, I just look at that and I think to myself, you know, these epiphanies come to you that you just don't think of until things happen. Well, how does our government, you know, all this stuff should be kind of quarantined when you look back, at least going forward, to say, sure, there's always going to be some sort of conflict somewhere. You know, we want to have as much bipartisan as you can, but each state should really run their own election internally. In what I see it, it shouldn't, first of all, ever go to another country. How can we let another country have anything? But then also, even, you know, I understand how you have private corporations, they can help and can lower the cost of different stuff. But when it comes to like an election like that, it's no different than, you know, where our representatives meet in Olympia, and they're the ones that make our laws, right?
Right. They are our servants to the people.
Yeah. So we would have servants within our state government who are running our elections. Our elections aren't going to be ran in a server at Amazon where they do not like conservatives right now, where they're taking and suppressing conservative news stories.
We should have no tech involved in the voting process at all. It doesn't matter what the population is. And it only matters, the only time condition that we have to count those ballots is presumably January 6th. That's counting the ballots. That's not receiving the ballots. They should be cut off at midnight, the day of the election. But we're not in any hurry to count those ballots as long as we maintain chain of custody of them and track them in their ballot boxes. The only tech that we should be using are IP cameras, whiteboards, and those large format flip charts that you write things on. Mm-hmm. Publish that information out onto a public website where everyone at any time can take screenshots.
Yeah.
And if you want to actually pass information, do it on a phone call, on a cell phone, on a secure line. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to send information back and forth from one level up to another level, do it in PZIP or 7-zip with a hashed file so that if anyone messes with it, it won't open. Mm-hmm. And then on the cell phone, you have to tell them in public, in full disclosure, actually you just write it on the whiteboard or the flip chart that the IP cameras are looking at. That's the only technology. The technology that we have should be used for the creation of chain of custody and to maintain it. And only humans count. My God, we can count warehouses full of millions of parts without machines by writing them down. I've actually managed a warehouse, so I know how it's done. You divide it up in teams and you do it and you count until you meet an acceptable error criteria, and then that's good. And you keep all of those ballots in batches. You write those batches down on the whiteboard. Those are pre-formatted whiteboards, so we're not prepping a tally machine. We're just prepping a whiteboard so that everyone can see, and we're writing it in plain sight. That is, all of these things should be done. If I was in charge of the election system, I could do it for half the cost, maybe 25% of the cost, because we would use the citizens. The citizens would do the work. The state would only provide the tools and the equipment from the tax dollars and provide oversight so that the people did, according to the Constitution, without interference from civil or military, carry out an election for their sacred right to vote. And until the people wake up and take it back and have an election that expresses that, you will be led into tyranny, and I guarantee you that you will not like it.
Well, thanks, Jim, for coming today and being with us. And it's been great getting to know you guys. And, and as we look through with, Washington is Dying and everything we've been doing here and kind of bringing everything out, voter integrity is something that is so important for us just to, get the everything in that is fair and the foundation of our future, and for me, I always look back and I just think of how fortunate my youth was and how innocent really and safe my environment was, and that's really where someone like you, is really going to be able to help us to get to there. And so when we, publish this podcast and we'll put up some information in regards to Jim's website and just some other stuff to where, we always just need to stay in the forefront of this and figure out a way and a solution to just make this all happen. So I really appreciate you coming from OMAC today and meeting with us.
You're very welcome.
Right.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim.